Welcome to Open Door Policy, the podcast from the Archdiocese of Detroit, where each and every episode we speak with a different joyful missionary disciple who is seeking to unleash the gospel in his or her own life. Today we sit down with Paul Duda, the creative director for the Archdiocese of Detroit, and talk about art and how God has worked in his life and the life of his family. And as always, we have our wonderful main host, Danielle Center.
Goodness.
Danielle, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Father Steve?
I'm good. We're doing this in like a weird quarantine, different location edition. It's, it's not the same as being in the same room.
You know what? I thought about this. I think that it's possible that our listeners think that we like hang out way more than we do, because like you and I actually don't really see each other outside of when we're recording, right? And
I
even
know.
now I'm like, wow, I haven't seen you in like weeks.
I know. I keep calling you to say, Danielle, do you want to hang out? Danielle, do you want to get together? And you're always like, I don't have time for that. So, Paul, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right, Father Steve. Thanks.
All right. Well, I think we're going to jump right into rapid fire questions, right?
Well, I have a question for you, Father Steve. Do you have any recent graces?
Oh, yeah, I do. I do have a recent grace. I had the opportunity for not too long ago, back around Easter, to go around and bless some Easter baskets for my family. So I kept a safe social distance from them, but was able to go to all their homes and sprinkle their Easter baskets with holy water and to kind of talk from a distance. And it was beautiful to see them and to talk with them and in the midst of quarantine and social distance that I had not been able to do in a while. So I was just thanking God for that grace in my life. What's a grace in your life, Danielle?
Man, you jogged my memory back to Holy Week then. So one thing that was really fun for me about Holy Week is, you remember when I was working at St. Anne, I put together this 7 churches pilgrimage. I brought it to Detroit, which was super fun. So I had like the Bible passages and songs. Of course, like you can't do it with like a lot of people anymore. So I just went around to 7 churches in my neighborhood. Only one of them was Catholic, and I just prayed in front of each of them the reflections of that night. So like Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus in front of Caiaphas and Annas, and like all those things. So that was really cool. It was like snowing, but it was really beautiful besides that.
Yeah, this has been a snowy April.
Wait, Paul, is this your first April with us?
This is my second April in Detroit, but it is my first one that it has been in the world. In Detroit, but it is the first one. The first one since I was a kid where it snowed in April. So it's been a while.
Hey, are you ready for rapid fire questions, Paul?
As ready as I'll ever be.
Question 1: what was your first job?
Oh, my first job was working for my dad's general contracting company. That was my first real job. I worked on a construction site.
And what was the most beautiful church you have ever visited?
Oh my gosh. The most beautiful church I've ever visited. I'm kind of partial to, I know this is probably not the most beautiful church in the world, but I guess one of my favorites is St. John Cantius in Chicago. I also really like St. Basil in LA, which I'm sure will be a controversial choice if anyone's ever been there. So.
And then what is the most recent song that was stuck in your head?
I think the most About Love, which is by Marina. It's that or the theme song from Tumbleleaf, which is a kid's show, a toddler show. So, yeah.
Okay. And then speaking of like shows and fictional worlds, in which fictional world would you like to live?
Oh man, is there like a time limit? I don't know how quickly.
No, don't worry, because Ron.
Don't worry, but it is called rapid fire. So
I'd say Harry Potter.
Ooh.
The Wizarding World of Harry Potter.
And speaking of, well, I know one of the characters likes to eat, the redhead. What is your favorite breakfast food?
Oh, my favorite breakfast food is biscuits and gravy. I'm like a biscuits and gravy connoisseur.
Oh man.
All right, Paul, my turn to ask you some questions. What Bible verse has really struck with you these days?
Oh my gosh, what Bible verse has really stuck with me these days? Well, we just finished Holy Week, so I feel like that's kind of a loaded question. I'm gonna say it is finished. I've just been contemplating on that very much, like the idea. I don't know how much you want to talk about right now, but that's my answer. It is finished.
Yeah, well, let's
Yeah.
go back to that in a minute, but let me ask you a couple more. Have you ever met anyone more famous than you?
Oh yeah, I've met a lot of famous people more famous than me.
Give me a famous
Dude.
person you've met.
Gerard Butler.
Ooh.
Who? No, I'm kidding.
He's I was gonna say.
Father Steve. Gerard Butler is a Scottish actor and film producer.
Who's your hero, Paul?
Saint Jose Maria.
What's your favorite book?
Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Harry Potter's a lot too much.
We're seeing a theme here. And then lastly, what was one location where you had a powerful encounter with God?
That's a really tough question.
Yeah, Danielle wrote these, so...
Oh my gosh. They're great.
I have trouble answering this question without it sounding like weird, but like my current wife, who was then my fiance, her Honda Civic.
Nice.
Okay.
I was honestly ready for you to say Harry Potter World, so it's cool.
I've been to Harry Potter World. I did not have a particularly like profound experience with God there. So
Wait, what is Harry Potter World?
it's like at Universal Studios. I used to, when I lived in Los Angeles, I was like 15 minutes away from it, so we went a couple times.
So it's like going to Disney.
For Harry Potter people?
Except way
except
cheaper.
for Harry Potter.
It's way cheaper.
So, Paul, tell me about the Honda Civic encounter with God. You know, a synopsis or some way that was powerful.
One of the questions that was asked to me, I think, was like, "How have I seen God work in my life?" Before we started this, and a lot of that was through my wife. And so when we got engaged, we had some pretty difficult conversations kind of in our engagement. And one of those conversations, I just really felt God's presence kind of there. And I felt his love in a way that I'd never experienced before. And it was, I think, while we were sitting outside her apartment in her Honda Civic when we were living in Los Angeles. So, that's my answer.
Tell me a little bit about Saint Basil and why this is controversial. I'm going to pretend like I'm asking you for the listener's sake, but also I don't know.
So Saint Basil's in Los Angeles is what I'd kind of classify it as almost like a communist-inspired church. But it's very utilitarian in its design, so it's very stark, but it's also kind of Gothic. Everything's very tall. Everything, brings your eye upwards, but it's so stark. The sides of it are made of like concrete, and they have these huge, beautiful black stone sculptures that are they're massive and they're almost terrifying in their scale. But they're just so striking, and the whole church just like kind of, I guess it kind of reminds me of like being stripped bare in front of God. And there's a beautiful crucifix with this kind of abstract wooden sculpture that surrounds it. I'd highly recommend you look up photos of it. You may and the reason I guess it'd be controversial is because I think a lot of people would look at it as like a modern church design where they've ruined the design of churches. I actually think it's kind of a beautiful implementation of classic church architecture with more kind of modern stripped down aesthetics. So it makes me think of God, at least.
That's really cool. I would love to talk more about that later. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience with Saint Jose Maria? Saint
Jose Maria introduced me to the idea of constant conversation with God. And so when I was just finishing high school, I was introduced to his one of his books, which is The Way, which is, if you're familiar with it, it's just kind of a series of basically instructions and inspiration that Josemaria wrote at different points to different people and for different people. And I worked my way through that. And what I realized in reading that and learning more kind of about St. Josemaria's charisms, I suppose you'd call them, is the idea of just kind of constantly bringing your life to God, of him walking with you as a friend throughout your whole day and your whole life, as opposed to kind of a lot of what I brought was, as a cradle Catholic brought up with, was like, you go to church to pray, you say the rosary, you go to mass, there's specific times, and otherwise you're kind of just on your own. And I won't say that anyone straight up told me that. That's just kind of how I understood it. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus as far as my catechesis goes.
Well, but there is kind of a sense that I think one of the beautiful things that Saint Jose Maria Escriva does is, to talk about the ordinary being infused with God's presence, right? That God can do
Mm-hmm.
great things in ordinary ways, and other saints have talked about that, but it really takes an intentionality on our part to see that. So that's awesome.
Thank you so much for all that, Paul. We really appreciate it and learning more about you.
Thanks.
I'm so
It's been a
sorry. I
pleasure.
didn't
Are we
mean to
done?
do that.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So, Paul, we actually go to church together. So I know you, and I've met your wife, and I've also met your beautiful child, but I don't know a whole lot about your story. Would you be so kind as to share some of that with us?
Sure. I guess I'll start kind of, my wife and I met while we were in school, in San Diego. We went to John Paul the Great Catholic University. And I actually I transferred there from a military school. I went there for my first 2 years of school, and then transferred to John Paul the Great to study film. And I was very much a fish out of water at a very small, like, Catholic college community. At the time, it was maybe like 90 students. And so my wife was also a very kind of a fish out of water. So we became friends. And to be perfectly honest, I became friends with her partially just because I thought she was way too beautiful for me to ever date. And I know that kind of sounds self-deprecating, but that was the truth. Back then. And it's still the truth, but I have more self-esteem now.
You guys are both beautiful people.
Oh, thank you. So we went to school together, we were friends, and then we ended up dating, and then I broke up with her because for a lot of different reasons, I was just kind of conflicted. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do with my life, and I broke up with her. And then a year later, thanks to the guidance of a really good priest who was the spiritual director to us both, we ended up getting back together. And 4 years later, we got engaged. And when we got engaged, everything became very, very real very quickly. They realized, that we were binding ourselves to each other and committing to kind of bringing each other closer to Christ and to God and to having a family together. And that just brought so much kind of to the surface about our own personal history and our lives. And that was really painful. I'd never gone through any kind of experience like that, of having to be like totally exposed and open to somebody else. And there still is a lot of pain from my upbringing and stuff that kind of had to be laid bare. And through that experience, I kind of realized, like, and I guess Jamie, my wife, her understanding and her love for me, I realized that that there's love in this world, and that God's love for me is kind of beyond anything I can fathom. At the time, I thought for sure that I was not worthy of that kind of care and love. And Jamie kind of showed me that not only was I worthy of it from her, but that God loved me even more. So that was pretty painful and also pretty incredible. And I'll say that's a huge factor kind of in my faith today. Um, and so, I've been a cradle Catholic my whole life, and I went to a Catholic school, and I, got the full-fledged theology and everything in high school and stuff. But it wasn't really until then that I realized, like, you can know maybe so much about your faith and God on an intellectual level, but that only gets you so far. For me, like a conversion really means like a turning of my heart, not just my mind, to God. So yeah, fast forward, a few years, and we had a child together. We got married first.
So,
Congrats.
Paul, when did you graduate from JP2?
Uh, I finished school in 2012, and Jamie finished 9 months. I finished in December of 2012, and she finished in September of 2013. We both wanted to study film and art, and we both also wanted to do that kind of in a Catholic environment. So that's where we ended up.
Awesome.
Yes.
So Danielle's rushing us along. Okay, so you both graduate.
Yeah.
So
we
you
both
graduate.
graduate.
So you graduate. You get married.
Yeah. We moved to
Chop,
Los
chop.
Angeles, not together. We moved to Los Angeles. Jamie got a job at the Archdiocese of Los Angeles as a designer. And I was working for a motion graphics design company who moved me up to Los Angeles. We got married while we were living in LA. And then 3 months after we got married, we were pregnant with Hank. We didn't know it was Hank at the time, but 9 months later, we welcomed Hank into the world, and our lives have been all the better for it. Then like I think a year and a half later, after Hank was born, we moved to Detroit. So Jamie left her job at the ADLA. I was doing freelance work as a producer and a designer. And then we started a business in Los Angeles, and Los Angeles is so expensive. And we had good friends who lived here in Detroit from college. So we came out to visit them, kind of scoping out Detroit, and just really ended up falling in love with it, specifically the East Side, which is where we currently live, and where Danielle and we go to Mass at St. Augustine, St. Monica. And so we moved in May of 2018, and it was only after we moved that I had any exposure really to what was happening with the Archdiocese and what was happening in Detroit. Only after we moved did I read anything about Unleash the Gospel. And when I was finally kind of exposed to it through some people at the AOD who were talking to me about a job there, was I like, man, this just feels like divine providence. Reading about Unleash the Gospel was kind of like I'd never read anything from any bishop or from the church in general that felt like it really was a call to kind of change, and a call to really look at what we're doing and how we're doing it, and to do it better, and to really kind of jump forward. So, I'm not very literate in church documents, so someone could have written it before that, but that was the first time I'd read something like that, and it was really profound to me. So.
You mean you have not read every pastoral letter by bishops
Of
in the country?
every bishop in the world. But
No,
you know
sorry
what?
to
There's
say
something
that
really
is-
beautiful to be said about that, right? Because we can't read every single thing. So the Holy Spirit was working in your particular situation too. You coming from California, this thing like building, this momentum building here in Detroit, and then you coming to that, like that's something really profound.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't. It's funny because Jamie and I had her experience working for the ADLA was formative, is a good way to put it.
ADLA is the Archdiocese of
that's the
LA.
Archdiocese of Los Angeles. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And her experience working there was it had its good parts, but it was overall pretty difficult for both of us. And so when we moved and when we had started our own business, we had actually both sworn that we would never work for the church again. And then
And then the
I
Holy
guess
Spirit
the
was like,
listeners,
"Ma ha 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 ha."
exactly. And then so I guess I don't even know if listeners know, but I currently work as the creative director at the Archdiocese. And that's because of Reading Unleash the Gospel, because we happened to move here just as things were really picking up with a lot of change happening at the diocese. And my boss Edmundo kind of found out about me, I guess. I wasn't hiding, but I wasn't really like putting myself out there for the church either. So
Mhm.
so he kind of, brought me in and told me what was going on. And I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. And here I am, officially an employee of the Archdiocese.
It's good to
They
have you
got
here.
me.
I'm so glad you're here.
So am I. Yeah, Ron. All right.
Ron, your voice needs to
it's
be on this.
it's a rare time we get to hear Ron on this podcast, so that's always a blessing.
Paul, thank you for sharing some of your story with us. Thank you for being with us tonight and for giving us that story. We really appreciate you being here and sharing with us.
Thanks, Danielle. I'm happy to be here.
Okay, gentlemen, I know that Father Steve knows my friend Julia. Paul, I don't know if you've ever met her, but anyway, little backstory. She is an architect, and I love, she was a guest on one of our podcasts too. But I love traveling with her because she sees the world through like an artist's eyes and an architect's eyes. And one time we were talking about churches, and I think this kind of tied into the St. Basil thing, and I wanted to bring it up. I think we were in Chicago, and we passed I don't know, maybe a casino or something, and it was built in like an old Roman style. And she stopped in the street and she was like, look at this building. It's out of place here because, and this is exactly how she travels. Like, we'll be walking and then she'll be like, stop and reflect. She's like, look at this building. It's out of place because, and Rome has a specific kind of buildings, like ancient Rome, because of the culture at the time, the tools at the time, the resources at the time, the like the kind of like architectural like math and building that was available at the time. So she was like, when you take something from a specific time and place it somewhere like this in downtown like modern day Chicago, it's out of place. It doesn't fit here anymore because it was made for another time. And she was like, and that's why we need to be careful about how we talk about church things, because things that fit into older like previous eras don't fit in the era that we're in right now. And then she just like stopped and kept walking. And I was like, oh my gosh. So that's, I think, an interesting opener. What is your perspective on that as a creative director? Where do you see art right now as you are a part of something that's been around for a while, the church, but you're also at like a particular crossroads in history?
Wow, that's a great question, and I love the idea kind of behind that of like things not fitting, right? And I think there's like we could go on probably or I could go on for hours about art
I'm here for
and
it.
that idea, but but I've always been a strong kind of proponent of marrying kind of the tradition of the church with the time we're in now. One of my favorite things, and I even answered it in the question about my faith, is its tradition, with a capital T and a little t. But the rich kind of art in our church tradition, the music, the all of that. I think there's so much strength in our foundation that throughout the hundreds of years the church has developed. But I also think there's so much space for new ideas and new art to build on that. I don't know that it's entirely fair, and Father Steve or Danielle, you might disagree with me, but a lot of people write off modern art techniques and ideas because, oh, it's not hard, or I could have done that, or, but I think that's like really, to me, it's a lack of looking farther or looking deeper into what people are expressing in their artwork. And I think there's a lot of space for marrying our tradition in the church with what people are kind of experiencing now, in their art. Because that's honestly kind of how I see it. Design and video, especially for the type of marketing stuff that we do, is a form of art, but it's more functional than it is just experiential. It has a purpose and something to communicate or something to promote. Artwork in its purest form, I think, is more of an expression of like some kind of expression of a human experience, whether that experience is an encounter with Christ, or whether that's an experience, or that expression is an experience of, an experience with the devil or something. I think there's space for all of that. And something a professor of mine in college actually once told me was especially as Christian or Catholic artists, is something we need to remember, is that there's no resurrection without the cross. And by that I mean, like, a lot of Christian artists tend to shy away from really kind of looking into sin. We don't want to depict sin necessarily, especially glorify it, but sin is part of our experience, and I think people want to be kind of connected in that experience, that pain and that hurt. And what I think we're called to do, especially as Catholic and Christian artists, is remind them, yeah, we're connected in that pain and that human experience, but we're also called to the resurrection of Christ. That's where it's leading, that pain, So to come back around to your art question, I definitely agree with it, that there's definitely like a sense of like, this doesn't fit because of, it's a 19, a design that was made straight from, 1965, which we're not doing anymore. It was a different time, a different place, maybe not the brightest time for the church. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there's no value in it. And I think that looking back on what we've done and looking forward to what we can do, and marrying those two can bring about something really amazing and beautiful, Anyway, that's me having ranted for 5 minutes about the answer to your question.
So let me give you something else to rant about, Paul. Is beauty objective or subjective?
That's a great question, Father Steve.
Because the classical tradition, this gets a little philosophical, but hey, let's all get a little rant in. This can be our quarantine rant, right? The classical tradition would point to an objectivity to beauty, right? That there's a kind of consonance and integrity of beauty, that the pieces fit together, that it has a kind of intrinsic value that's recognized by the observer. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. In the 20th century, and certainly into John Paul II, there's a kind of a turn philosophically towards personalism, which sees the individual person being able to kind of contribute not just to this objective form, but to say, the subjectivity that I bring to something is a gift in my life, but also in the life of the church. So the individual nature of humanity is kind of shown forth in the first half of the 20th century, and then expanded at the Second Vatican Council to talk about, especially in Gaudium et Spes, this nature of the interplay between man and the world, between faith and culture, and all these things. So I just wondering, as someone who lives in this world, has studied it, what's your take on kind of art as being, hey, this is objectively beautiful, right? We can go to a place like Notre Dame Cathedral before the fire and say, like, if you don't think this is beautiful, there's probably something wrong here. But that doesn't mean everything of it doesn't mean every artwork has that same objective aspect to it.
Yeah, I think that my professor, my philosophy professor in college, had this great kind of metaphor, or metaphor he uses, like, if you taste strawberry ice cream and you say it tastes like, I don't know, pickles, you'd be wrong, objectively speaking, right? Like if it's
Yeah.
strawberry ice cream and it's made properly, it should taste like strawberry. So if you're saying it tastes like pickles, something's wrong.
Yeah.
But probably in your taste buds or something, but something's wrong.
Or someone spiked
And
the ice cream with pickle
yeah,
juice.
exactly. Like so, something's
Or you just
wrong.
don't know what pickles
It's
taste like. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, exactly. So, but if I say I strawberry ice cream, I just don't like strawberry ice cream. That's completely different than saying this tastes like, you know, pickles. And that's I always love that metaphor because it's such a good example of like how I always liked being able to be like, yeah, I think that's beautiful. I don't really care for it,
Mm.
but it's
Mhm.
Okay.
beautiful, you know? Like it's a really good sense of like, can you and it's so hard. I've been in so many or seen so many like arguments on social media or in person about what is art. But one of my one of my pet peeves is actually people who don't like something saying something is bad.
Mm.
Because it's something it's like something about the human language. It's the same way we say we love something that we really just like a lot. We'll be like, oh, you know, that movie's bad. And it's like, well, no, actually, the movie structurally is sound. It's got a good plot. It's well made. It's, you know, consistent. It's beautiful. You just don't like it. That's the difference. And you can say what you don't like about it, but if you look at it kind of, and that's the question though, right? That if you talk about it's any secular artist, they're like, well, who's making the rule book for what's right and what's wrong? You know, we have a, not so much a rule book, but we have that guidance kind of in our understanding of nature and natural law. We have that understanding, and that's I think we're blessed in a lot of ways to have that. I mean, in so many ways to have that, but because it kind of acts as a guidance for what, especially in art, like what is objectively beautiful. I think that means that there are things that are objectively ugly too, right?
Yeah.
That I don't know. That's something that's maybe even a bigger question is like, is something that's objectively ugly therefore not art? Can something that's be like that might be objectively ugly,
Well,
you
could you say
know,
it's
does
bad
art have to
art?
be beautiful?
Could you
Yeah, I
say it's
mean
bad
it's
art?
a good
Yeah.
question. Maybe it's
Yeah.
meant to be ugly. I don't know.
Just to take a different question here, Danielle. You know, we talk about growing as disciples and this kind of desire to be missionary disciples. That presupposes a kind of a relationship with God, right? That we're following the
Right.
Lord. Do you pray with art? I mean, is art part of your prayer life? I'm just wondering, like, how that
Yes.
fits in. What does that
For
look
sure.
like? What would it mean to say I pray with art?
This is a really interesting question, and one to think about is the term art is incredibly broad, right? It would be like saying, I love, like, do you
Yeah,
like
so
athletics to an
yeah,
Olympic athlete, right? There are like
yeah,
a billion Olympic events.
got it. So visual
So,
art. Yeah.
right. Yeah. So, actually, I find that I pray a lot through dance because it's like St. Augustine says, when you sing, you pray twice. I really feel that using my body as a form of worship as well. And this is not liturgical dance, lest everyone like suddenly freak out. I'm just talking like going to a party, there's music, there's dance, like classy dancing. I'm there for like a wedding. I am throwing down. And I think that there's
So you're praying at weddings while you're on the
oh,
dance floor?
all the time. Yeah, yeah,
Come
yeah.
on,
Cause
come
I'm so
on.
free there. Wow. Get out of here. Anyway,
No,
so
like I'm trying to understand it.
okay, so
Doesn't
yeah,
that
because you
go
were
back
just
to that? That goes
here
back to
I
what I
am.
was talking about with Saint Jose Maria, right? God can
Right.
come
So
into anything at any moment.
and I just think about like some you're there, I'm with people that I love, and I can just close my eyes and be free, listen to the music, and be like, God, you brought me here with all these people that I love, and my body is awesome, and you made it for me. Thanks a mill. Like that is totally praying. But like, do I pray through art? Sure. I love to make art. One of my favorite quotes is by St. Maximilian Kolbe. Let this blow your mind for 4 years. Love alone creates. So this concept that God is love and God creates, and with God we can also create. So yeah, I definitely say that I love creating
Wait,
through art.
wait. So I do have one question though, Danielle, and not
Go
not
for
because I
it.
believe you and I trust you, but when you're dancing at a wedding on the dance floor and you're praying, what happens when like "Get Low" comes on?
Did you do air quotes while you said praying, Paul?
I
I heard
I
air
felt
quotes.
them. Like I felt them come through the airwaves.
No, I really
Wow.
I really didn't do air quotes.
You know,
I'm so sorry,
dancers,
Danielle. I
Maybe
really
dancers,
maybe
commenting
I did
social
the air
media.
quotes. So.
You guys, you know
no,
what? I'm just
Danielle.
gonna say there are other dancers out there who heard me and were giving praise hands, and we're like, "Yes, girl, you are so right.
No,
We can pray through dance."
Is that what air
I
quotes
wish
are
you guys
called?
could see.
Praise hands?
I wish you guys could see my face. I am not
No,
Danielle. I totally believe. I am not making fun of you in any regard. I'm just curious. Like I get distracted in mass when someone coughs. So I don't know. I
yeah.
do not experience that with dance, but I just love to know.
Well, okay, so it's just like any prayer, right? Can you be distracted out of it? Sure. But like, is it
Right.
also a part, like, can you also redirect it towards prayer? Yeah. So, yeah, I love praying throughout. And I think I should say too, I love classic art as well. That wasn't like a dig at the beginning of like, old art of the church is not cool. Cause it really, really is. But, there's also, I think, this interesting invitation for us today. Like, what does it mean? And Father Steve, you work with Paul Duda because you're the director of evangelization, unless they changed that title. Am I supposed to say more title? And a catechesis of
No,
schools?
no, you're not.
Okay.
No. It's say the whole thing. It's the director of evangelization and missionary discipleship. That's the whole title.
Yeah.
Yep, you got the whole title in there. Yeah.
We
No. I know what you're saying, Danielle. Art can mean lots and lots of things, but I was thinking about like the visual type of art, like how beauty in visual art can open our minds to prayer. Because I find that one of the most beautiful places with stained glass to me is Blessed Sacrament Cathedral. And they have this
Yeah.
beautiful rose window above the choir loft. They have gorgeous depictions. There's I was the Archbishop's secretary for 4 years, which means I got to skulk around the sanctuary for 4 years during all the masses.
Oh, was that on the job description?
Skulking, yeah, liturgical
Okay.
skulking, yeah.
Father
Okay.
Grau is the best skulker.
Yeah, he does it much better. But there's a way from the Archbishop's chair where he looks out and sees Christ the King, the beautiful north-facing window in the transept of the cathedral, and I just find that to be like during the liturgy when I'm in there praying by myself. I just find it like opens my mind and my heart and like once it helps me give myself to Christ and it helps me see like Jesus acts in power and in mercy in my life and wants to, and I can trust him with that. So, yeah. I think we're right up against time here, so that may have to be the second to last word because Paul, we always give our guests the last word. If you have any last kind of prayer or anything you want to share with our listeners before we wrap up.
Yeah, well, I guess we're all in quarantine right now, and I think for a lot of people there's a lot of pressure to maybe be productive or be creative, especially as a creative. I think there's a lot of pressure, like, oh, so much time on my hands, I should
Right.
create. I guess I just want to kind of encourage people, like, whatever is happening in your heart right now, for anybody, it's happening for a reason, and listen to it. Take care of yourself. Listen to that. What's happening in your heart? Listen to God, and take care of yourself because it's so easy to get wrapped up in thinking about, especially in this day and age with social media and all that stuff, which I work in. To get wrapped up in what we should be doing versus like what other people think we should be doing versus what God is actually asking us to do. And so I guess I just encourage people to really listen to God and what he's asking you to do. It's funny because I'm saying words out loud that I need to listen to.
Well, as a priest, we always talk about you're preaching first and foremost to yourself.
Hmm.
So that's what I hear you saying.
Yeah. So yeah, that's all I'd like to encourage people to do. I mean, I'm kind of just taking it one day at a time now, and I guess I encourage everyone else to do the same.
We appreciate it. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you.
It was a ton of fun sitting down with Paul in our quarantine, remote, social distancing, open door policy studio today to hear about his love for biscuits and gravy, his love for Harry Potter, and how he thinks art helps us to know God and to follow God in our lives.
If you liked this episode, please share it with your friends, your neighbors, your relatives, your Trader Joe cashier. You can also leave us a review on iTunes. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Our handle is @OpenDoorDetroit. Help us unleash the gospel. Open Door Policy was produced by Ron Pangborn and the creative team of the Archdiocese of Detroit.
I find it kind of disturbing to think about.
I'm Father Steve Polis with Danielle Center.
And this has been another episode of Open Door Policy.